Hey, so tell me if this sounds familiar. You have a US LLC, you're not a US citizen, you don't live in the United States, and your business doesn't operate from the US. But you set up a US LLC because you wanted a cost-effective and tax-efficient structure to run your online or consulting business. And now you're struggling to open a bank account for your company. If that's you, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that you do have options, including remote options that you can access from your home country without getting on an airplane. In certain instances, you'll even be able to access big name US banks like Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, Citibank, and many more. The bad news is that many of you are not going to be able to access any of these options for one big but simple reason, which I'm about to share with you. If this is your first time on the channel, I'm Chris, Head of Banking Relationships at GlobalBanks. We're a team of banking experts that decodes international banking and helps individuals and businesses overcome their cross-border banking issues. I spend my time talking to bankers, uncovering new opportunities for our clients, and helping them navigate the ins and outs of cross-border banking. In these videos, I'm sharing the secrets that banks won't tell you, but they do share with us so that you can start to unlock the benefits of US banking for your US LLC. Now, no surprise, we've helped many entrepreneurs from a wide range of countries and industries open bank accounts for their LLCs. But what might surprise you is the number of people that we've actually turned away. And as I mentioned, there's one simple reason for that. And the reason, drumroll please, is money. More specifically, how much money you can deposit and keep in the account for your US LLC. Here's the thing, corporate service providers, registered agents, CPAs, lawyers, etc., they all sell the dream of setting up a US LLC remotely, operating it tax-free in certain instances, and then getting access to US banking in the process. Maybe if that's you, you even bought one of these corporate setup packages that included company registration, registered office, account opening, tax filings, accounting services, and so on. But here's the problem. Most US service providers, they either cannot help their clients with banking from the get-go, even if they say they do, or they shove you into low quality or purely digital banking, even if your business can't qualify for digital banking options. If you applied to and were denied by Mercury, I'm talking to you here. Basically, in the US, digital providers like Mercury, they have onboarding restrictions tied to business activities, place of business, and the countries involved. And these restrictions are only going to get tighter. How do I know? Because the FDIC has been investigating partner banks that are taking deposits from digital platforms like Mercury. They're putting more pressure where it actually matters, which is on the regulated entities that determine whether Mercury and other platforms like them can actually take on customer deposits. Now, I'm not picking on these digital platforms, and I'm definitely not picking on Mercury. In fact, if you can open a bank account with Mercury, Relay, Wise, etc., do it. Whether you need the account or not, it's always good to have a backup, and you should go and get those backup accounts. But if you can't, or if you've already been denied, or if you have specific reasons for needing or wanting a real bank account, then you do have a few choices to make. Some reasons driving people to brick and mortar banks that might include needing accounts with a regulated entity, desiring direct FDIC insurance of your accounts, requiring brick and mortar banks for different business reasons, wanting access to financing like credit cards, lines of credit, etc., or a wide range of other reasons that can vary from business to business. And not surprisingly, these brick and mortar options do not accept every and any business. Likewise, they do not offer zero deposit accounts. Instead, they have operating expenses, compliance, and system expenses that need offsetting, so they only want profitable clients. And that typically means a minimum that you need to make in terms of deposits. So when it comes to US banking, there are two scenarios. I've talked about these in another US banking video that I'm gonna link at the end of this one that you can take a look at to get more details on how to move forward with your application. But basically, there's two scenarios. Scenario one involves banks that require in-person opening, require a US address, and require a US phone number, along with a US utility bill. And generally, these banks, not surprisingly, are catering to US operating businesses. Scenario 2 banks, they offer remote account opening, accept foreign addresses, foreign phone numbers, and foreign utility bills as proof of address, and they accept both US operating businesses and foreign operating businesses. So what does all this mean for you? Well, if you've already been denied by digital banks and you want to open remotely, you're probably gonna have to look at Scenario 2 banks. But here's the problem. Scenario 2 banks, they tend to have higher deposits, typically between $25,000 and $250,000 for business accounts, depending on the business, the countries involved, the risk profile, etc., etc. If you want to go with Scenario 1 banks, you can definitely open business accounts with much lower deposits, between $1,500 to $2,500, depending on the bank. but you are going to have to show up in person. If you don't want to show up in person and you still want access to these big name banks, you're going to need to make a deposit north of $100,000, and you will need a business with an attractive profile that can qualify in the first place. If that's you, visit us at globalbanks.com, get in touch, we'd be happy to assist you with opening accounts. But here's the thing, the vast majority of US LLCs that have been set up by foreign non-resident entrepreneurs, they typically are not in a position to make a $100,000 deposit. And they've been sold this dream that they can open accounts remotely with suitable banking institutions. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. But I do want to make something really clear here. If you can fly to the United States and you can meet the local document requirements, you can open accounts with Scenario 1 banks. Also, if you can't travel to the US and cannot make a $100,000 deposit, you can open remotely with Scenario 2 banks, but you will need to provide supporting documents and you will need to make that qualifying deposit. Now, if you can't open with Scenario 1 banks, and you cannot meet the deposit requirement for Scenario 2 banks, again, $25,000 to $250,000, depending on the bank, you will need to look at digital banking platforms. Again, there's nothing wrong with this, and we would normally suggest that you start here anyway, especially for first-time entrepreneurs who do not want to make a large deposit. And then, once you have at least $25,000 to deposit for your business, you'll be in a position to consider Scenario 2 banks and explore additional options for your US banking stack. Or you can make time establishing the necessary ties, obtaining supporting documentation, and then fly to the United States and open with Scenario 1 banks in person. Now, we don't typically focus on digital banking, we tend to focus on brick and mortar banks only, but if you want us to make a full video breaking down the US banking options that are available through digital platforms, just comment digital below, and if there's enough interest, I'll try and get that out in the next couple weeks. Okay, that's great. Scenario 1 banks, Scenario 2 banks, fine, you can open remotely, you can open in person. But let's talk about the actual process you can use to start applying for accounts. Now, this will be relevant whether you decide to apply with Scenario 1, big name US banks, or Scenario 2, the more flexible US banks, or even Scenario 3, digital US banking platforms. High level, there are a number of steps you will need to worry about. Step 1, it involves determining the specific benefits that you're after. This isn't a fluff statement, it's actually really important because you need to narrow down the specific banks that you'll want to target when it comes to try and actually apply for an account. A few examples of what you might need include support for international wires, access to certain products for excess capital, direct access to low-cost payment processing, which certain banks do provide directly, a dedicated account manager that you can contact whenever you need, multilingual support in your native language, access to secured business credit cards, or future access to unsecured business credit cards, which certain banks are willing to provide even for US LLCs that are owned and operated by foreign non-residents. Now, whatever your priorities are, figure those out first. Then jump into step 2, which involves preparing your application, and the biggest thing you need to solve for here is your supporting documentation. More specifically, an acceptable US address, an acceptable proof of that address, and an acceptable US phone number. Yes, there are other documents and information that you're obviously going to have to provide, but these are basically standard documents that you're going to need to provide no matter where you open in the world. Instead, it's the US address, proof of address, and the phone number that stop most people from successfully opening US accounts for their US LLCs. Obviously, if you're going with Scenario 2 banks here and you can make a larger deposit, you don't need to worry about these variables. You can simply provide your foreign documents, foreign proof of address, and you'll be fine to go ahead and open accounts. I'm going to do another video on how to overcome these US requirements in detail. So if you're interested in these topics or US banking more broadly, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when we publish those videos. Now, step 3 is how to actually open the account. Scenario 1 banks will require you to show up in person. Scenario 2 banks will involve opening through a video call. And Scenario 3 banks, these digital options, they're going to allow you to open directly online through their website or application. In all instances, you are going to need to communicate your business's ties to the US, your need for the account, a description of your business activities, and many more details. The main area that we see people messing this process up is actually in the business description. And in most cases, they mess up by providing extremely detailed information about their business activities, accidentally and unnecessarily red flagging their applications, and essentially marking their business as undesirable, unprofitable, or difficult to deal with. Now, obviously, you need to provide sufficient information to explain your business to the bank or financial institution you're considering, and that information needs to be truthful and transparent. But you don't need to tell the bank your life story. not unless they ask for it. The fourth step, and this is important, is making a qualifying deposit. Basically, this is going to determine which banks are suitable to you. If you can make that $25,000 deposit, you have more options, but basically Scenario 1 banks, they require deposits between $1,500 and $2,000. Scenario 2 banks, it's the $25,000 to $250,000. And Scenario 3 banks, they range from $0 to $5,000, depending on the platform that you go with. Okay, now that was a lot to take in. I've asked the team to add our free US banking guide in the pinned comment below. This is going to give you a complete breakdown of the process and requirements to open US bank accounts for your US LLC. So go ahead, grab your copy, it's 100% free. On the other hand, if you qualify to open Scenario 1 or Scenario 2 banks and you'd like our team's assistance through this process, visit us at globalbanks.com/USA. There you'll see how you can access your own team of banking experts to help you decide which banks to apply to, in person or remotely, how to overcome common opening challenges, how you can receive direct introductions to excellent bankers in the US, and how you can meet some of those sticky requirements that are difficult to overcome as a foreign non-resident. But before you go, if you have made it this far in the video, make sure you give us a like so we know that we should keep making more videos like this in the future. And if you want to dig even deeper into the world of US banking, here's the video that I mentioned that will help you overcome the challenges of opening US bank accounts, both for individuals and for US LLCs. If US banking is a goal for you, this is definitely a must watch. So I'll meet you over there in a minute. Thanks for watching.